Hello viewers, it's Kevin Borras and Bob McQueen again, and we're talking about the smart mobility revolution. Bob is writing what we used to call a book called the Smart Mobility Revolution, but it's not a book, it's a body of knowledge. It's not just what we're calling evergreen content, which is publishing and printed material. We're talking about digital as well, audio, video, interactive white papers, the whole lot. So it's a body of knowledge, B-O-K. So on the first episode of this video trailer, we spoke about exactly what is smart mobility. We can't talk about the revolution of something if we don't know what we're talking about. So we defined what smart mobility is. Today, though, we're going to be looking at the technology behind smart mobility. There is so much of it, we can't cover all of it. So if we don't discuss your technology, apologies in advance, but we're narrowing it down to 4 of what we think is the most interesting sectors of technology that form the backbone of smart mobility and therefore the revolution. Bob, I'll let you take over. So what is the first of those 4 subjects we're going to briefly look at?
Well, thanks, Kevin. And of course, the 4 we're talking about are the hot topics today, but probably not the hot topics tomorrow, because we're in an emerging technology situation. And in fact, the technology is emerging at an accelerated pace, which is one of the reasons why we put the body of knowledge together and why we want it to be online as well as in print.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about automated vehicles. Some people call them autonomous vehicles. We want to talk about the urban air mobility, blockchain, and can't remember the 4th one. What was the 4th one, Kevin?
Mobility as a service. It was
mobility as a service. That's it. Yes. Especially for people who are getting old and starting to lose their powers of retention. Yeah.
Yes, the silver travelers, we call them.
There we go. Yeah. Silver alert.
Yes, right. Yeah. So let's start with autonomous vehicles, or automated vehicles. They're kind of been around a lot longer than a lot of people realise. But I remember my first time I was in an automated vehicle was 1998 in Leiden, in Demo 98, with an autonomous vehicle following magnets that had been embedded in a there at that point not unfinished motorway. Come a long way since, and I would say the last couple of years, it's really sort of come on stream. You've now got a lot of multinational publications, news outlets. It's just talking about autonomous vehicles. It's a lot more mainstream in the last, I'm going to say 2 years. Tesla's obviously helped with that, where you can discuss Tesla. But in terms of a smart mobility revolution, where do autonomous vehicles fit into the whole framework?
Well, my history, or my view of history of autonomous vehicles goes back a bit further than yours, Kevin. I believe the original autonomous vehicle was the horse. And, if your horse was smart enough, then he could actually take you home when you're no longer able to find your way home.
True.
But I prefer to use the term automated, and I'll tell you why, because most of the modern approaches to automated vehicles are not autonomous. They require some kind of interaction with the roadside. And, it's fairly simple. There's no point in your autonomous vehicle or automated vehicle turning left when there's a sign that says no left turn. Or somebody changed the road marks last week. Or somebody closed the road today because of construction. So there needs to be interaction. And that's why they have LiDAR and radar. There's also a big change in the business model. 10 or 15 years ago, we would see this being led by the public sector, significant public sector investment with common taxation-driven funding. Today, it's mostly private sector. There are about 1,400, 1,500 field tests of automated vehicles in the US right now, and they're all driven by the private sector.
Yeah.
Now, we could go down a rabbit hole here, we won't, but I've just been doing some work for the Society of Automotive Engineers, and one of the challenges is the private guys are not too keen on sharing data on what worked and what didn't work because it's proprietary. Fair enough. But we could move the whole business a lot further, faster, if we would just share some of the basic stuff.
So, like, if you like, a common database of knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, you have to protect your investment, but there comes a point where you have to share in order to move the whole industry forward.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in you being the very best and way out ahead when the industry has stalled because we don't have shared knowledge.
Sure. Okay, well, we're going to be talking about that obviously more
Right.
in the book. But in terms of air, then let's look towards the air, urban air mobility.
Right.
How does that, obviously, when I say how does it work, I don't mean technologically. How does it work in the framework of a body of knowledge?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind are drones, which have become very popular. And, in the US, you can become certified as a drone pilot. But really, we're talking about vehicles under 55 pounds in weight and vehicles over 55 pounds. We're also talking about vehicles that will only be used for goods and cargo, and
Mhm.
vehicles that will be used for passengers. And as you can imagine, there's a whole different set of certification
Yeah.
requirements for passenger vehicles. Uber have recently sold their Elevate business, looking at urban air mobility, to a company called Joby Aviation, who are probably closest to certification right now. And one way to look at it is, okay, it's flying cars.
Hmm.
It's the Jetsons. It's what we always expected, and to some
Yeah.
extent it is. But it's also the world's smallest airport. Yeah, and guess, Kevin, where they're building the world's smallest airport right now?
Vatican City, world's smallest country.
Croydon.
Oh, that's very true. Yes, now, viewers, this is where I live. Yes, that is true.
That's
I,
right.
I completely forgot about that. I should have
Well,
answered that, but I thought Vatican City was a better answer. But yeah, they are.
don't be worried about that strange buzzing noise.
But that's I did wonder what that was. But I mean, I remember speaking to someone who lived in San Diego maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and they were talking about Taco Bell applying for a license to deliver
Yep.
tacos to people's houses via drones, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
So, how close is that?
And this might be kind of cynical of me, but you'll know that the industry has matured when somebody hijacks your food delivery.
Yes, true. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely deliveries. We're seeing it with pharmaceuticals in rural areas. A company called Catapult are doing that in Africa. We're seeing Uber, and Uber had a very elegant way of describing it, which is we're adding a third dimension to urban transportation. Urban transportation is two-dimensional. We're
Yeah.
adding a third dimension, and rich people in developing countries are already doing this. If you go to Sao Paulo, where the traffic speed is 2, 3, or 4 miles per hour, anybody that's got any money is using a helicopter.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing the way being piloted, if you like, for that. Pardon the pun.
Nice.
But it's possible. And then years and years ago, and you're probably not old enough to remember this, Pan Am used to have a heliport on top of the Pan Am building in Manhattan.
All right.
And that was the early application. Unfortunately, one of them fell out the sky because helicopters were not as safe then as they are now. And now we're talking about multi-rotor, we're talking about electric propulsion systems, we're talking about very advanced onboard navigation systems. We could even be talking about remotely piloted things,
Right.
the stuff we use to assassinate people with cruise missiles and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but for more positive use. And I think this big opportunity here, a lot of money going in, and I think we're going to see some interesting things happen over the next few years.
Okay.
It's very important to the local government guys, and they may not realize, it may not be on the radar screen yet, but what you think of a mobility hub that had a small airport on top, so you could drive there or be taken there by Uber or even micro mobility, or even walk there if you live within walking distance, and then be taken by light aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing, to a major airport for then to continue your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Opens up new possibilities of one of the things that's important about the smart mobility revolution is the ability to be complete.
Yeah.
Complete trip from original origin to ultimate destination, complete sweep across all aspects of transportation.
Yeah. Sure. It's a new element to the idea of multimodality, I guess, as well. So let's talk about
Absolutely.
mobility as a service then, because that's a bit more established. People I'm far more familiar with the term of mass. Where does that fit into the revolution? Because again, the idea of a revolution, we spoke about this in the first video, potential can only last for so long, and the idea of a revolution can only last for so long. Where does mass fit in?
Well, you'll eventually see the connection here, but I bought a stove once for our house in Orlando, and it wouldn't fit in the kitchen, so we had to remodel the kitchen. So mass is a bit like the stove. It's not going to fit into conventional ways of doing things, so it's actually going to be a catalyst for the revolution. And I'll tell you why. Federal Transit already figured this out in the US. You can't just support pre-planned trips with mobility as a service. You have to be able to support spontaneous travel decisions.
Okay.
Now you're talking, mass being multimodal traveler information. The smartphone app,
yeah,
it tells me all my modal choices. It tells me my trip chain choices. It tells me something about the quality of the service. What's the reliability? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? It allows me to make a single reservation for the whole trip chain, and it allows me to make one electronic payment for it. Right? That's essentially what mass is.
Yep.
But that forces us to understand, well, if you're offering people an effective trip chain, you've got to guarantee the connections.
Yes.
You've got to guarantee that I can make a smooth transition from one mode to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you've got to make sure that any transit alternatives are realistically feasible. Okay, America is the land of the car and very low distribution land use. But my son's girlfriend at the time wanted to go to cosmetology college, to be a makeup artist. And if she took public transit there, it was going to take her 2.5 hours. So we used to give her a ride every morning. It took 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to take account of the differences. And then there's a lot of talk about micro mobility, and I'm a big fan of micro mobility. The idea you can just pick up a scooter and electric scooter and use it and then leave it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But would you do that in a thunderstorm, and would you do it in 90-degree temperatures? So, I think our traveler information needs to add new dimensions like weather into the equation as well. And I think mobility as a service is wonderful. In fact, I'm hoping that in the future, people don't make a car payment. They make an equivalent payment for unlimited on-demand transportation.
Yeah. Well, that's what Sampo Heitinen, for example, from Mars Global has been talking about for years. Exactly that. So the final section we're going to talk about is blockchain. Now, blockchain is one of those phrases that maybe 3 years ago was not even in the transportation or smart city sector. Right. Now you can't move for it. So in terms of revolution, I see that. The blockchain revolution for transport, transit, smart city, smart mobility is already there. But is that, again, it's such a disruptor? Is what we're talking about adjusting to fit into blockchain rather than the other way around?
Well, my weird sense of humor, I'm thinking while we're talking here, Kevin, what do you call a blockchain expert? Is it a blockhead?
Yes, it has to be.
Ian Jury, maybe?
Yes, it has to be a blockhead. If you're insulted by that, I apologise, that it's Bob's idea. But yes.
One of the issues with blockchain is we're marketing the technology and not the applications.
Right.
It's been hyped as this wonderful solution to everything, but what does it mean? And I did some work with Florida's Turnpike on their electronic tolling system, SunGuide. And like a lot of electronic tolling systems, they kind of hit a plateau about 80% market penetration.
Yeah.
Right. Beyond that, for some reason, people are resistant to using electronics. And because they're not using the electronic system, we don't really know who they are or what they're up to. But we have a good idea that it's people who are unbanked, who don't have a bank account, and people that want to remain anonymous.
Yeah.
So even if you offer them a discount, they won't shift. So we came up with this idea of why don't we combine the electronic tolling system with a loyalty program? And we worked with these guys. They have a wonderful name for their business. They're called Thanks Again Loyalty Program.
I like that.
And it didn't work out, but as part of that conversation with the Turnpike, we uncovered the fact that for every 1% of people who don't use electronics, who insist on still using manual cash, it cost the Turnpike $1.4 million a year in operating costs.
Wow.
Right? So there's a big incentive to get more people to go electronic. Long story short, that's where blockchain comes in. Mm-hmm. Blockchain can have two financial impacts on a tolling agency. One is an app to allow more people to use the transponder without setting up an account. you know, better suited for the casual user.
Yeah.
And then the ability to cut costs, because you don't need a financial clearinghouse. You don't really need a credit card company involved in your system when you've got a blockchain that's doing the job and it's a peer-to-peer network. So those are the big areas. And then Ford Motor Company opened my eyes last year. I went to an SAE conference and listened to them. And I'm not sure if they were genuine about this. Maybe they were covering up what they were really doing. But the guy told me that they're using blockchain to allow you to negotiate with the guy driving in front of you to move over so you can overtake him. And in return, a small payment is made to the guy that moved out of the way.
Right,
and then, you know,
that sounds unlikely to me.
Right, being Scottish about this, I'm thinking,
Yes,
I can make some money at this by just getting out and driving slowly.
Bizarre. That sounds massively unlikely. If it's true, then apologies to Ford, but that's extraordinary, isn't it?
Isn't it? But
bizarre. We need to look.
and you know, I'm sure we're going to see it being used. Like Toyota are talking about an autonomous, automated vehicle that is a mobile store. You know, you want to buy a pair of sneakers, it comes out with all these sneakers on board, and you probably use blockchain to pay for them.
Yeah, indeed.
So, you know, that kind of concept. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of blockchain, but let's talk about the applications. I'm a big fan of automated vehicles, but let's understand that public transit and goods vehicles are probably going to come first. And I'm also delighted, you know, NHTSA said that their estimate is that automated vehicles will avoid 80% of crashes, right?
Yeah.
We don't have enough, you know, we need billions of miles of travel to prove that. But Google Waymo has done some work with simulation, and it shows that, yeah, their vehicle avoided every possible crash that wasn't avoided by a human. So, and you know, my final point on automated vehicles, Kevin, is my friend Rick Schumann is keen to say. He says perfection is the enemy of the good. I think in automated vehicles, you know, I could be wrong here. I could get you know, roasted for this, but I don't think it needs to be perfect. It just needs to be better than a human. Yeah,
it needs to be more reliable and not emotional as well. Take the emotion. I think if you took the emotion out of driving, you'd reduce accidents by 75% anyway. So machines are not emotional, as far as I'm concerned. They're not. I think my nearest cash point is, but largely machines are not emotional. I think that's just a perfect example of how that's a good thing. It's not. It's taking the decision making away and putting it in that sort of perspective of this is the perfect time to make that decision. That's clearly how it works for me. Anyway,
I got to tell you, Kevin, I've had 2 encounters with ATMs over my career. One was in Glasgow, where I came out of the office and there was an ATM in the corner, and this guy was standing there, and he said to me, "Do you have a card for this ATM?" Which is an odd question for a stranger to ask, right?
It is, yes.
So I said, "Well, why are you asking?" He said, "Well, I was walking along here and somebody had just used the ATM, and I put my fish and chips down on the ledge to tie my shoelace, and the little visor came down and my fish and chips are stuck inside the ATM."
Lovely. I like that.
The second story is I'm about to use an ATM in Kirkintilloch near Glasgow, and I'm just about to put my card in the slot, and the slot disappeared, and this pair of eyes looked back at me. But obviously, they were either fixing the machine or replenishing the cash.
Yes, it's one of the two.
Because I'm a consultant and never lacking in smart things to say, I asked the guy, "Can I have £20, please?"
Did you get it though?
No, he took the slot back.
Nice one. Excellent. Thank you for that, Bob. Well, always end on an anecdote. I think we should make this a thing. So thank you for joining us again. We'll be talking on another subject that's part of the smart mobility revolution in our next video. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you've got a bit of a feeling, a bit of a taste of what this body of knowledge, not a book, is going to be about. So Bob, thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. And join us again shortly on the Smart Mobility Revolution. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.